You're about to watch what we call an extended clip of the Young Turks, and the reality is it's somewhere in the middle. It's a little longer than our YouTube clips, but it's actually shorter than the whole 2-hour show, which you can get if you're a member. You can get it ad-free, and make sure you catch every news story we do that day. You're gonna love it as a full show. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Thanks for watching. It's a Friday, so for the first time ever on YouTube TV, drop it. All right, Cenk Uygur, Anna Conspiracy, Carol Costello. Hey,
I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
I'm a little scared, but
oh, is that right? Okay, that's good. You got some.
She warned me.
I did warn her. I was like, Cenk gets a little animated, and she started cracking up.
And then I cried.
Well, there'll be a lot of emotions on tonight's show. And look, we got some amazing stories. We got some tragic stories, unfortunately, as usual. But of course, Carol is at HLN, but also does opinion for CNN.com. So you should read that. You should check that out. And great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And there's so much to talk about, and all of it's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we'll find a silver lining in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, actually, your colleague, Chris Cuomo, that's the second story, kind of the second story. Another great interview, this time with Giuliani. So he's killing it.
Oh, yeah, Chris likes to do that.
Yeah, well, bless his heart.
Kellyanne Conway, Rudy Giuliani, 1-2.
Yeah, well, Netanyahu, he had a really great interview with Netanyahu. So, anyway, I have a long story about Chris, but that's for a post-game one day. All right, unfortunately, we do start with tragic news. Anna, what's up?
There has been another school shooting, and unfortunately, this time the death toll is rather high. 10 individuals have died as a result of this shooting. Reports indicate that 9 of the individuals who lost their lives were students, and 1 was an adult. Now, we don't know the identities of the individuals who lost their lives, but we do know quite a bit about what occurred and the perpetrator of this shooting. So according to reports, a suspect is in custody. Also, a federal law enforcement official has confirmed to NPR that his name is Dimitrios Pagourtzis, a 17-year-old who is believed to be a current student at the school in Santa Fe, Texas. And immediately after this story broke, reporters started investigating the shooter and found a number of social media posts that were concerning, including posts featuring weapons, also some posts featuring Nazi apparel or Nazi symbols on his apparel. Students said that he was mostly quiet, kept to himself, but always wore a trench coat, even if it was scorching hot outside. Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez said that a police officer is among the injured, but the extent of the officer's injuries is unknown. Now, around noon, Santa Fe Independent School District announced the possible explosive devices that have been found located at the school and off campus. As far as we know at this point, nothing has been detonated. Authorities worked extremely hard to make sure that they made the environment safe. So luckily they found those explosive devices and none of them have been detonated.
So in a story I just read right before we went on air live, couple updates. They say 2 cops were injured. 1 is in critical condition, shot in the arm. Hopefully he'll be okay. They're not positive if none of the devices have been detonated, but it appears that way, and they're telling people don't touch anything. If it looks out of the ordinary, leave it alone. They're worried that they are pipe bombs and then pressure cookers. If they didn't go off, thank God they didn't go off, and thank God he was at least incompetent in that way. And we give you the name of the shooter on the first day, and then we try not to repeat it after that. It is relevant on the first day. Of course, everybody's always curious, what was the motive? And unfortunately, a lot of people deduce the motive, right or wrong, and oftentimes wrong, based on the name. And so now in this case, and then of course the next step is social media, and I think that's of course far more indicative. And it appears, if all of that is true, and by the way, there's always a little bit of a fog in the first 24 hours, and some of these stories get corrected, et cetera. But if that stuff is true, yet another right-wing shooter and right-wing terrorists in this country comprise 71% of the terrorism that is done here. And yes, things like these massacres at schools is, in a sense, terrorism, especially done for political purposes, if this was done for political purposes.
Right, and we don't know what the motive was, so I want to be clear about that. But what we also know is in his social media, he followed right-wingers, including Donald Trump. So again, I don't want to, he was a Trump supporter. Based on his posts, it appeared that was the case.
He just might be a very troubled young man.
Anyone who would do this is a troubled person.
Is a troubled young man, right? I interviewed a student earlier this morning who was in that classroom. The first class, it was an art classroom, and he went in with his sawed-off shotgun and his pistol. He was dressed in this long trench coat, and on the back of the trench coat it had USSR, which is odd for a 17-year-old, right? Because the Soviet Union was a long time ago. So you're all wondering what is up with that. But he wore that trench coat every single day. And he went into the classroom. He didn't say anything. He shot a female student in the head. And then he shot her with a pistol. This is according to, his name was Avery. He was an amazing young man to be able to speak after witnessing such a thing.
That's so
and
terrifying.
then he went on to shoot other students in that classroom. And then he moved on down the hallway and entered other classrooms and started shooting. At some point, Avery's friend, Zach, ran out into the hallway and somebody pulled that fire alarm, which was a bad thing to do, right? Because it caused all the students to run out into the hallway, which gave the shooter more targets.
So I want to mention something about that because there was a really harrowing part of this, and all of it is harrowing. But first, though, on the USSR, I mean, what a topsy-turvy world we live in. Where, I mean, in the old days, that would have been far left, right? But now, because at least Trump supporters view Trump as being on Russia's side, but that's the old Russia versus the new Russia. But it's so confusing that you've got 17-year-olds who might be right-wingers wearing a USSR thing on their trench coat. What? And by the way, so the reason I say it's terrorism if it's done for a political motive is he could be far left, far right, whatever he might be. Let's say that it's, that it holds that he had the Nazi paraphernalia, et cetera. And then, but be upset that his girlfriend had done something. And then it wouldn't be terrorism.
Well, I will say this, another student was interviewed who said this kid was bullied. The kid wore the trench coat, you're right, every single day. This young man said that this kid smelled. This is what he said. And he said that other kids made fun of him for that and bullied him. And that might have entered into this whole psychological stew that caused him to explode into violence on this day.
So I read about how he was on the football team and that he, in one game, played a huge role in leading the team to victory. And by the way, that was based on an interview with another student. And that student said, who, by the way, would work out with him time to time, he said that he didn't know of this shooter getting bullied, but there was one example of the coach mentioning the way that he smells. So I don't know how much he was bullied or if he was bullied at all. But what I do know is that stories like this often turn the discussion to an important topic that needs to be discussed, which is gun control and what we need to do. And oftentimes, right-wingers or people who do not want to discuss gun control will say, no, this is about bullying. And I always find that interesting because these are usually the same people who will turn around and accuse, let's say, the LGBT community of being snowflakes if they don't enjoy the discrimination that they deal with, or they'll accuse women of being snowflakes if they've been discriminated against and are voicing what they're going through. The snowflakes thing keeps getting tossed around by the very people who think, oh my God, it happened because of bullying. We really need to do something about bullying.
Well, I will say that Governor Abbott came out later and said that he didn't want to just offer prayers.
Yeah.
He actually wanted to do concrete things and I know I'm going to say this, he wants to hold a round table, and I know you're going to laugh at me, but he said included in that round table discussion, I want people with all different kinds of views, including people with views on gun control. And if that's really true, then that is a step forward for Governor Abbott and the state of Texas.
Okay,
You don't think it's true?
so I hear you. So look,
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be. Featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity, the UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFTR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Will they do a roundtable? Absolutely. So is that part true? Yes. So, is it for optics? Absolutely. Will Governor Greg Abbott do anything about gun control and hence the real cause of the school shootings? Absolutely not. And if I'm proven wrong, I'll come out and tell you guys, wow, man, Greg Abbott in a shocking turn of events, and boy, well, it was wrong. Look at this video where I got it wrong.
Even strong believers in the Second Amendment believe in some form of gun control.
No, they don't.
No,
they
yes,
don't.
They do.
I have his Carol. Where is it? They've done nothing.
Of the politicians that are in office. Maybe they'll step forward because it happened in the great state of Texas.
But I do agree. I do agree with you, Carol. The majority of Americans do want more gun control. I don't know what percentage of gun advocates want that. I know the NRA doesn't want that, but I don't think that the NRA is representative of all gun advocates. I'd be curious to see the data.
Yeah, well, I do know some of the data. So 93% of Americans want federal background checks. So that includes an overwhelming majority of Republicans, gun owners, and even NRA members. That doesn't mean the NRA is in favor of it or any Republican politicians. There are some in the Northeast, et cetera, Northwest that might be in favor of it. But overall, the overwhelming majority of Republican politicians, including Donald Trump and including Greg Abbott, take money from the NRA, and because of that outright corruption, and that's what it is, and it's systemic corruption. Everybody, it's an auction. All of our elections are auctions. So
So you have no faith in the NRA's new leader, Oliver North?
Oh, please.
Now that was a good one. Okay, and so you know what? Just to point that out, let me go to graphics 19 through 21 here to give you guys a sense of it, because I don't want to just leave that charge as a general one. I want to put specifics behind it. In the last 15 years, the NRA has spent $132 million in politics. Now, they didn't spend that for their health. They didn't do it for charity. The NRA is largely representative of not even their own members who want federal background checks, but gun manufacturers who do not want any gun regulation because they're in the gun business. So they spent $132 million.
They're capitalists.
Yeah, well, they are, but we shouldn't let them buy our politicians, and that's exactly what's happening here. So make no mistake about that. And then in this cycle, in 2016, the one that just happened, obviously, so they put in $54 million into the presidential and congressional races, almost all of it going to the Republican Party and Donald Trump. In fact, Donald Trump was the beneficiary of $31 million by the NRA. So Donald Trump also saying, we're gonna get to it a little bit later, that he is gonna do something about this. No, he is not. He didn't do anything after Parkland. He said he was going to, and then the NRA yelled at him and said, hey, remember we gave you $31 million? He's like, yeah, I'm sorry. I won't do anything except add guns into schools, and which of course
Actually, the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas, he didn't say add more guns in schools. He didn't say that, but he said that we had to redesign our school buildings because modern school buildings have a lot of exits, right? Mm-hmm. Which means a lot of places where gunmen can go into the school. So he said we should wall those doors off and then maybe limit schools to 1 or 2 doors. And then you could post a good guy with a gun outside every door and be able to afford it.
I like that you brought that up, because this is usually what happens when a bad actor uses weapons to cause harm to others. The people who get inconvenienced are the victims, right? So I use the example of the TSA. So one person attempted to detonate a bomb in his shoe 1 year, and now all of a sudden we all have to take our shoes off as we go through the security line at the TSA. I mean, we get our genitals poked and prodded, all sorts of things are going on. We all get inconvenienced. And then when it comes to shootings, I don't want anyone to have to go to school walking through metal detectors or dealing with giant walls that enclose them to the point where they feel like they're in a prison. I don't want them to have only 1 or 2 exits in that campus.
But you do it at baseball stadiums and at football stadiums. You walk through metal detectors. They check your bags to see if
that's
they're
true.
weapons. So why shouldn't schools have the same thing?
That's a special event, though. That's not something that you're going to have to deal with on a daily basis. I don't want to have to deal with something like that on a daily basis. I wouldn't want my kids to have to deal with it on a daily basis. The point is, we keep inconveniencing all the victims and potential victims as opposed to changing the fundamental issue here or doing something about the fundamental issue.
So two things about that. One is, sometimes when you go to a different country, Turkey, Israel, a lot of different places, there's a lot of people with that are military or cops with assault weapons, and it's disconcerting, and it doesn't feel good. And by the way, if you go to Cuba, lots of that, right? So now, when you go to drop off your kids in school, I guess there could be now the possible proposal is somebody with an assault weapon in every classroom. Okay, so let's think about it this way. This guy also had bombs. Now, first of all, if you use NRA logic, the only thing that could stop a bad guy with a bomb is a good guy with a bomb. Okay, that's the insanity of the world we live in.
Actually, that's a very good point, because you wonder when exactly this kid planted the bombs inside the school. He also had bombs at his home and in his car. So because they had 2 school resource officers on campus, right? Mm-hmm. So where were they when this kid was dropping off his bombs inside the school? I don't know the answer to that question, but it'd be interesting to know, right?
And so even if you're not going to counter bombers with more bombers, which gives you a sense of the insanity of this conversation, so according to this new logic, that's okay. We're not going to take the bombs out of the school or out of society at large. What we're going to do is build bigger walls so that the students won't get as hurt by the bombs that detonate inside the schools. That's the insanity we're in. And they literally make those arguments in relation to the other weapon, guns, okay? And so the last harrowing part is, there is 2 different stories, and as you can tell on the first day, there's a lot of different stories, but these are students, and they talked, in this case, to CNN. And one of them said, our teachers tried to get us to not run because we've practiced this. And they actually, in February, had a drill because they thought they heard shots outside the school, at this particular school. So they went and you do these active shooter drills, right? So you're supposed to get up against the wall, et cetera, and blockade the door. But the kids, of course, panicked and they ran. But other parts of the school, the kids heard these loud noises. They didn't know what was going on. And they get into the hallway, and then their teachers say, run. Mm-hmm. Okay, yep. And then the principal's outside telling everybody, run, 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 basically run for your lives. So this is the state of our schools in America. And the thing that is killing our students is literally guns. It's guns that are killing them over and over and over again.
I always think that people don't realize the panic you feel when you hear gunfire. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just panic, and you don't act logically. Your animal instincts take over, right? And
Absolutely.
You just flee because you want to stay alive. So I think that when they say, shelter in place, it's easy, follow all the rules, we did all the drills, that's hard to do.
Incredibly hard to do. I don't think most people would be able to do. I know I wouldn't be able to do that.
And imagine the terror you feel when you're like, wait, is it a fire drill? And you heard what you thought were gunshots, and then your teacher in a panic says, run.
And also just for a second, everyone put yourself in the position of the students who witnessed that female student get shot in the head right in front of them. You know, think about how horrific that is and how traumatizing that is. By the way, I want to leave you with a quote from a student by the name of Paige. She was interviewed after the shooting, and the reporter had asked her, you know, were you shocked? Were you surprised that this happened? And here's what she said. It's been happening everywhere. I always felt like eventually it would happen here. I wasn't surprised. I was just scared.
That just breaks your heart.
Yeah, and that's the state of America right now. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We're not done with this story yet. We do want to get to Donald Trump's reaction and some other layers to the story. And then we do have some political news as well. Giuliani getting caught on TV in a wonderful moment of hypocrisy. Thanks for listening to this podcast. You're only halfway through, so hold, stay right here. Just want to remind you, if you want to get all 5 segments of the Young Turks commercial free, these are just 2 of them. Every day we do it. So go to tytnetwork.com/join and you get the whole 5 segments, 2 hours, ad free. Do it now. All right, back on the Young Turks. Ben Mankiewicz joins the panel as well. So we've got 2 Turner family hosts here as well. So Turner meets TYT. Okay, so we got a lot more on the shooter, and like I said, then we'll get into some domestic politics with Giuliani, et cetera. So Anna, what else do we have?
All right. The shooting in Texas has led to the loss of 10 individuals. They've lost their lives as a result of a student coming to the campus with a handgun and opening fire. 9 of those individuals were students and 1 was an adult. Now, I want to share a video featuring one of the students who survived this shooting, and it gives you a sense of how traumatic this is for the students who just experienced their peers get gunned down in front of them. Take a look.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Heard the alarms, everybody just, started leaving, following the same procedure as we did, because nobody thought it would be this. Nobody thought it was a shooting. Everybody just thought it was a, normal procedure, practice, fire drill. And next thing you know, we just hear so many, 3 gunshots, loud explosions, and all the teachers are telling us to run, go, run. Me and my friend Ryan Calvert ran to the forest so we could get shelter. And that's when I called my mom. Because I thought I was gonna have I was having an asthma attack. And I just wanted to be safe.
Now, if you look at the numbers, 20 weeks into 2018, there have already been 22 school shootings where someone was hurt or killed. That averages out to more than one shooting, more than one shooting per week. This is according to analysis done by CNN. These are not mass shootings. We're talking about school shootings. And so this has become all too commonplace. And in response to this, Trump mentioned that it's become all too commonplace. So I want to show you his statement following this shooting, and then we're going to compare it to previous statements that he's made in regard to other shootings. Take a look.
This has been going on too long in our country, too many years, too many decades now. We grieve for the terrible loss of life and send our support and love to everyone affected by this absolutely horrific attack. We're with you in this tragic hour, and we will be with you forever. My administration is determined to do everything in our power to protect our students, secure our schools, and to keep weapons out of the hands of those who pose a threat, everyone must work together. May God heal the injured, and may God comfort the wounded, and may God be with the victims. Very sad day. Very, very sad. On another note.
Yeah, look, to be fair to him, those transitions are always awkward. But somebody wrote those words for him, and so he says them, but they're empty, absolutely
you think
empty.
that someone wrote? I don't think that part was written.
He had coherent sentences there.
It looked to me like there was a transition written that he didn't want to say. And
Well,
so
no. He was at a meeting with the UN, with the head of the UN. So he made those remarks about the shooting. But the meeting wasn't about that.
Right. Yeah.
And that was why the awkward transition. Now, whether he wrote them or somebody else wrote them is not at all important. The question is he going to actually do something? Is he actually going to follow through on those words? Well, we have some evidence because there have been all these shootings already. He had plenty of opportunities to do something this year, the year before, and certainly after Parkland. So, Anna, did he follow up on the words he said last time?
Of course not. I mean, there were a lot of prayers and a lot of blessings being handed out, but there was a very brief period of time after the Parkland shooting where it appeared that he was going to go off right-wing messaging and actually do something about gun control.
He was going to raise the age limit to buy a gun,
That's right. That's right. And then all of a sudden, after all that tough talk and after a meeting with NRA people, he decided not to do so. And if you look at his reaction and response after previous shootings, you'll see a similar theme. So let's take a look at how Trump reacted to the Parkland school shooting.
To every parent, teacher, and child who is hurting so badly, we are here for you, whatever you need, whatever we can do. We are all joined together as one American family, and your suffering is our burden also. We hold on to God's word in Scripture. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will heal you. I want to speak now directly to America's children, especially those who feel lost, alone, confused, or even scared. I want you to know that you are never alone and you never will be. We are committed to working with state and local leaders to help secure our schools and tackle the difficult issue of mental health. I will be meeting with the nation's governors and attorney generals. We're making our schools and our children safer will be our top priority.
How's that coming along? And so empty words after every shooting, and then he pretends to be a tough guy, and he yelled at the senators, both Democrats but mainly Republicans actually, and said, "Oh," and at one point at the Republican governors, he said, "Oh, you guys are scared because of the NRA, and you won't do anything, but I will. They got nothing on me. I'll do it." And he said that he was going to take all these different actions, and then he walked them all back. And the only thing that was left is armed teachers. In other words, buy more guns from the gun manufacturers and then put them into the schools. So that was the only thing that was left. Why? Because the NRA loves that idea. So empty words last time, empty words this time. He is completely bought and sold by the NRA, who gave $31 million to get him elected.
He should ask the NRA for money to fund all of those armed security guards at our schools nationwide. Yeah. Why doesn't the NRA pony up the money, or at least the federal government? Or maybe President Trump could suggest to Congress some sort of legislation that they could introduce that would provide the money that these schools need to provide the security that our children need, if he's really serious.
Mm-hmm. We all, we all appreciate honesty. He's not serious. Of course he's not serious. We know he's never going to do anything. We know that also, by the way, nothing particularly got done in the previous administration, and we had school shootings then. But things changed after Parkland, and there was a different feeling, a feeling that we didn't have after Connecticut, after Newtown, because those kids were too young to speak.
Yeah, but we won't know if the feeling is real until after the midterm elections.
No, we won't.
Right?
No, I'm saying, but from merely the perspective of the manner in which things were covered, is that we had 16, 17, 18-year-old kids standing up and calling politicians liars to their faces. And a day or two for the mainstream media to be like, we don't talk this way, right? And then recognizing that this was one, compelling television and compelling stories, and these were people unafraid to speak truth to power. The only changes that were going to happen, the only political pressure that was meaningfully applied, because we didn't see it under Obama, we didn't see it under Clinton particularly, or Bush, is from these kids. These kids, again, here at Santa Fe High School are old enough. It sounds like they'll be speaking, right? And I'm just saying that it's their relentlessness that is going to make it. I know you're shaking your head, but it's inconceivable the politicians are going to move without their.
I thought something would happen after Parkland too. I did. I did, because I cover so many of these, and frankly, it's depressing.
Yeah,
and it's sad and it's wrong, right? So I really thought things were going to change after Parkland, and then the demonizing set in,
right?
Where these kids were called every name in the book. And then slowly, and you could almost feel it physically, that part of the country was turning against these kids. No longer were they these well-spoken, young, well-meaning people. All of a sudden, they were actors, crisis actors.
Worse, what did Oliver North say, Cenk?
He called them civil terrorists.
Yeah. Head of the NRA called children civil terrorists who'd seen their kids killed.
Right.
So, but to me,
a good number of people in America believe that.
Totally, but the mere fact that the NRA and guys like and criminals like Oliver North sort of recognize that, our problem here isn't Democrats. They're not our enemy. They're not going to get this done. They couldn't get it done when they had the president. Our enemy is these 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids, and calling them terrorists and able to reframe it. So I hear you. I just think that at least what changed after Parkland was a different type of debate. That's still a long stretch from meaningful type of...
Actually, the one thing that it did, it lessened the fear of Democrats, the fear of the NRA by Democrats,
That's right.
It gave them like a purpose. It made it okay for Democrats to come out and say, hey, I believe in gun control. I think there's something wrong here.
Maybe I shouldn't be afraid.
Maybe I shouldn't be afraid to say something.
That's so sad that it took 16-year-olds for Democratic politicians to gather up a tiny bit of courage.
So we now have to count on these kids again.
So, but in this case, it's a countdown till when the NRA starts demonizing the kids in that school. And by the way, they rightfully asked a lot of Democratic politicians, hey, Harvey Weinstein was a monster. Are you going to give the money back that he gave you? Well, the NRA gave Trump, in essence, $31 million. And then the president of the NRA, Oliver North, called the Parkland survivors civil terrorists. So is Donald Trump going to give back the $31 million? He says he's going to do something. I mean, this NRA is vicious against the victims of shootings. And mark my words, they will attack these kids. Today, there'll be a lot of empty talk. Oh my God, thoughts and prayers, and we should do something. And Trump says something, I don't know. It's definitely not gonna be anything. Greg Abbott, it's something.
Santa Fe won't react the same way as the Parkland kids. And I'll tell you why. That young man that I interviewed, Avery, whose friend witnessed that horrible shooting of the kid in the classroom. I asked him, were there armed resource officers on campus? And he said, yes. He goes, but I don't believe that guns are the problem here. He went there. I didn't ask him. He went there. I don't believe guns are the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's Texas. They just believe the culture's different. It is.
And
it's
Santa Fe's a smaller town in Texas as well. So,
but it's just 30 miles from Houston. It's did you guys read the quote in the first part from that kid, the student Paige, who said when asked, has it happened everywhere?
Yeah, she's like, we expected it.
No, we expected it to happen.
Yeah.
And so, look, we don't know. We'll see, obviously, how it turns out. My guess is that even the culture of Texas, that when you see your kids getting shot and murdered, that at some point you go, hey, maybe, just maybe, there are too many guns around, and every lunatic in the country can easily get a gun, legal or otherwise. This kid, apparently, according to the authorities, just took his dad's legal gun and murdered people with it. So I believe that at least some of the people in that school and some of the children and some of the parents will say, no, of course we shouldn't allow guns into schools.
Do you want me to read you what Senator Ted Cruz said?
I can't wait. Okay, what did that monster say?
I knew that you'd all recoil when I said his name. He said, there have been too damn many of these, Senator Ted Cruz said. Texas has seen too many of these. We've seen deranged murderers, whether this morning here, whether a deranged bomber in Austin murdering innocent people, over whether 6 months ago in Sutherland Springs, another evil criminal murdering innocent people. deranged.
evil.
Right.
But even by their standard, which is totally false, because you know how much if our statistics differ than any of the rest of the developed world in terms of mental health, they do not. We have the same percentage of deranged people as Finland, as UK, as France. Generally speaking, we have the same mental issues that here as we do in the rest of the developed world. We're not outliers. We don't have more crazy people in America.
We have more of them in office.
Yeah, well, that might be true, but what we have is guns everywhere that those countries do not have. So every crazy person can just grab a gun and start shooting people, and you have massacre after massacre. Other countries like Australia said, hey, that doesn't seem like a good idea. Why don't we stop the guns? And guess what? They have no mass shootings. None since they do that. And even by their own standard of mental health that Ted Cruz and Donald Trump emphasized. So what did you do about it? Nothing. In fact, you defunded things that would help in the mental health area. So even by your own standards, you're an unbelievable liar. So Ted Cruz wants to defund it, Donald Trump defunded it. So they're lying to you. They're not gonna do anything about mental health, let alone guns, and the massacres will continue unabated. And by the way, one more thing, the MAGA crowd, okay, Donald Trump is the best, he does everything, he's so great, he solves, all right, great, so what did he do about the massacres? What did he do about the school shootings? Nothing, they're not solved, are they? Are you tired of winning yet? No, he's a loser, and he doesn't care, he's deeply corrupt. So he says, hey, NRA bribes me, that's your kids getting shot, what do I care? That's what his actions have shown again and again.
I just want to correct one tiny thing, and of course I agree with everything you said. There was recently a shooting in Australia, but you are right in that it's incredibly rare for these types of shootings to occur in Australia because of their stringent gun laws.
So that would be the first one, I think, first mass shooting since 1996. Okay, and this is our first mass shooting since a couple of days ago.
Carol referenced it earlier, but the exact, Trump and Ted Cruz want to talk about mental health. The quote from Dan Patrick, the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, is that anything causes this except the guns. So mental health is their issue for him. He's, of course, a fierce opponent of gun control. The issue may have been caused by Texas schools having, quote, too many entrances and too many exits.
Yeah, it's the doors.
It's well, in fairness, I mean, he does have a point. There's really,
Well, he has a point because we have guns.
We have a lot of guns out there right now, so you got to do something.
So
you limit the number of doors, and you guard the 2 doors, and you don't let people in who wear trench coat in 90-degree weather.
What happens to the student who conceals a gun in his or her backpack and goes to school as usual and opens fire? People try to get out. And
Carol,
there's only one entrance or exit.
Wow,
there might be a valid reason to have fewer exits and protect students more, but that's only because of the culture we live in. The idea that the issue that we should be focused on now is the doors. Anything to keep us from focusing on the guns. If we lived in Australia, they don't care how many exits there are. I
get what you're saying, but I think that I do think that Republican officials seem to be trying, and I bring up Governor Abbott again. I mean, he said that something needs to be done. We can't just pray it away. It is he's saying this, right?
He
said this. He beat Lieutenant Governor,
He beats
right?
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick,
exactly.
No question.
No question. And he said, I really want to have a serious discussion about this. I want a roundtable discussion, and I want viewpoints from everyone. And even if nothing happens, that's still a tiny step forward, isn't it?
Okay, so luckily the audience will get to judge for themselves, because if Governor Greg Abbott does wonderful things to limit shootings in Texas and limit these massacres, then we'll give him all the credit in the world if he comes up with interesting, constructive ideas. Well, that's in the future, so we'll get to find out, right? I'm betting that there's a 0% chance that happens, but you'll all get to see for yourselves. Okay.
So I'm gonna skip ahead to Giuliani. All right, let's do it. Rudy Giuliani is doing his media tour talking about the investigation of special counsel Robert Mueller into possible Russian collusion. And during a conversation with Chris Cuomo on CNN, he was asked about whether or not Donald Trump should be forced to testify if he is given a subpoena. And of course, Giuliani has a different idea in regard to the treatment for Trump versus the treatment of other previous presidents. So without further ado, let's take a look at the first video.
I never heard of a subpoena for the president's person.
Well, you said exactly that.
No.
And you
Subpoena-
went on to say,
Chris, let's distinguish between a subpoena for documents, subpoena that takes the president out of the Oval Office and puts him in front of a grand jury or hearing. Can't do it. Can't do it the second. You can do the first.
well, you never did that distinction before.
Well, it never occurred to me they would try to subpoena the president.
That's exactly what was going on in 1998. But people are going to say I'm making this up.
And they lifted.
Here's Charlie Rose with you in the interview, and you tell me what you meant.
Come on.
What, you don't want to hear
It's
it?
not even relevant.
If the president is asked to testify, subpoenaed
That's
to
really
testify
unfair.
before
What you're
a
doing
grand
right
jury.
now is extremely
No,
unfair.
I'm giving
The
you a
reason
chance
people
to
don't come
explain
on the
it.
show.
Oh, stop.
Not going to do it.
With all that promoting of
You don't have a
Avenatti,
choice.
ambulance
What
drivers.
happens if Robert Mueller
What does that have to do with this?
Because they're all trying to bring Trump into that, and he's not involved in it, Chris.
Okay, so that's another great interview by Chris Cuomo. And look, I've criticized him, I've praised him in the past for the different things that he's done. It was a great interview he did of Netanyahu the other day, unlike anything I've seen on American television, and that was wonderful. The only thing is they should have kept Giuliani's mic shut, okay? Because he wound up filibustering and talking over the part where Giuliani says in that interview about President Clinton, of course they should subpoena him. And so it is a direct, and it was not about his documents, it was about his person, as Giuliani called it in the earlier part of the interview.
Yeah.
So it was direct, 100% hypocrisy. That is not they say, oh, well, that's a gotcha question. Well, that's because we got you on your hypocrisy. So that is what a job of a journalist is. What is your actual opinion? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? And I have to challenge you. So what are you not supposed to do? Chris Cuomo is supposed to know that Giuliani said the exact opposite earlier, but not mention it, what, to appease power?
No,
that's not how journalism works.
I also want to emphasize a statement that Giuliani made in that interview. He said, this is the reason people don't want to come on your show, which I think is important because it brings up that issue of access and how the powerful will refuse to go on programs or news or go to news organizations that are going to ask the tough questions. They just want softballs. That's all they want. And if you're going to ask him a tough question, he's not going to appear. This is the reason why people don't come on your show.
Well, I think that Rudy Giuliani doesn't want to be called a liar because in essence, that's what Chris Cuomo made him, right? A liar.
Well,
because he doesn't really feel that way. And he was caught in so many other things during that 45-minute interview. It was insane.
Yeah, and by the way, Cuomo or anyone else did not make Giuliani a liar. Giuliani made himself a liar. So there was a very easy way to avoid that. Hey, Chris, you know what? Back in 1998, I did say that the president should testify and should be subpoenaed. You're right. Then that's it. You're not a liar.
And hence, wrong back then.
Or I was
like,
wrong,
I was wrong.
or I thought the
I've
president
changed my
there lied
mind.
under oath. I think that's different. That's such a serious crime that I warranted. I mean, nobody believed him, but it's an answer, and then move on, right? And I think I don't know, Carol, you know better, but if Rudy Giuliani never comes on CNN again, I suspect the network will continue to thrive.
We'll be just
somehow
fine.
find its way.
We hope he does though, because when you talk to Rudy Giuliani off air, he's a great guy. I mean, so he's been nice to me, right?
Right, sure.
So I hope he does come back on CNN because I think it's valuable for the viewers. They need to see him on every network he can be on, frankly.
Yeah.
Because he's the president's lawyer.
And whether it's Fox News or anywhere else he went on, you do get a sense of what their stance is, and it doesn't look pretty to the rest of us. But they believe it, and their job is to go disseminate that. But if you say, hey, I'm only going on Fox News because they'll give me softballs. By the way, Giuliani also butchered that. I mean, and he gave him softball after softball, and he couldn't hit him. He made a mess of it, right? But then they'll only have Fox News. So if the ground rules are, I get to ask you legitimate questions as a reporter, then of course have Giuliani all over TV. That'll be great. And that's what Cuomo did there.
Well, the fact is Mr. Trump has, 40% support, right?
About.
So that leaves 60% of the rest of the people who are probably watching other networks besides Fox News. And Rudy Giuliani and Mr. Trump have to appeal to those people too. Mm-hmm. So it would behoove them to appear on CNN and MSNBC. And
I don't think
the Young Turks.
Yeah, but they don't. Yeah, that would be good. But they don't care about that. They are governing to the 40, and it's been pretty effective actually. And the only real threat that he has, because we're not going to, the likelihood of indicting a sitting president is a stretch and would take something that we have not certainly seen yet. The ramifications, as the founders intended, the ramifications of the kind of behavior that Trump is engaged in or anything similar are political. And those ramifications, if you're maintaining a solid 40%, are unlikely to come to fruition.
Well, something else that Giuliani said during that interview, you know, there's this notion that Mr. Trump is alleging that during Obama's administration that the FBI planted a spy in his presidential campaign. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was James Comey, right? And he tweeted that twice this morning.
Yeah.
So Chris Cuomo asked Rudy Giuliani, was that true? Do you have any evidence? And Rudy Giuliani admitted that he'd read reports about it, but he didn't necessarily know if it was true.
Yeah.
That was really disturbing to me because if you don't know it's true, why are you saying it on national television?
Right. Yeah.
And it's just to throw doubt into people's minds about the Mueller
It was intentional.
investigation.
Absolutely. That is their tactic.
I read this. I said this poll to Cenk. You mentioned it. I saw it. I wish I had it in front of me. But a year of attempting to discredit Mueller and Comey, Republicans their entire lives, most of their investigators Republicans. But they're mostly what they are professional federal investigators. That's what they've been. But more than 50% of the country, I think the number was 53. Is that right, Cenk?
It was 61% of Republicans.
61%. I think overall the number was above 50 of Americans who believed that the Mueller investigation was political. Mm-hmm. And that's a victory. That's what that is. That's just so little doubt, so little doubt, so little doubt.
Yeah, and so there's been a lot of focus groups and a lot of studies. MSNBC did one recently, and they said, these are Trump voters. They said that the Mueller investigation was just created by the deep state. They won't. These are all talking points they heard from Giuliani, Trump over and over again. They won't investigate the Democrats. That's not true. They did. They won't investigate Hillary Clinton. They did it publicly in the middle of the election, and it might have cost her the election. And in fact, the New York Times reported that the FBI was concerned that even though they were investigating both candidates, that they could not say anything about the Trump investigation. And part of the reason why they wanted an informant rather than publicly going and talking to any of the Trump officials is because they didn't want it known that they were investigating Trump. But twice they declared, we are investigating Hillary Clinton. So nonetheless, these guys say, no, they're deeply partisan in favor of the Democrats, which makes no logical sense. And other words used to describe Mueller by the Republicans in that study were desperate, unethical, partisan, liar. Robert Mueller is a Republican, a lifelong Republican. So if he is a partisan, he's a partisan, believe it or not, on your side, Republicans. But they won't see straight because they do that propaganda. And if you dare challenge that propaganda, even for a minute, as Chris Cuomo did there, whoa, unfair! That's why we won't go on your show. How dare you show the truth?
They do the fake news thing.
And who else, by the way, participated in keeping the investigation of Trump quiet for fear of tipping the scales unfavorably toward Hillary Clinton during the election? The President of the United States, Barack Obama, who kept quiet about that investigation. All of them believing in the back of their minds, or not even so much and to some extent the front of their minds, that she was going to win anyway. And they would undermine the process if they made that public.
Yeah, how'd that work out? Yeah. All right, we got to take a quick break here. When we come back, candidates in Georgia try to out-crazy each other.
No, this is the best story of the day.
Yeah, all right, so buckle up. Thanks for watching what I hope was a lovely edition of the Young Turks. Now, you know that is 2 of the 5 segments that we do because that's free. We want to have you support independent media and come watch the whole show that we do every day. That's 5 segments overall, no ads at all. That's at tytnetwork.com/join. Come become a member. Thanks for watching either way. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.